back, yogis and yoginis. Welcome to day 5. Today we're talking all about contentment. Now, another word that we could use for contentment is happiness, but I purposely did not use that word because happiness is way overplayed. And there are slight differences between contentment and happiness. The Yoga Sutras themselves don't really use the word happiness. They really focus and concentrate on this word contentment. Contentment, or santosha in Sanskrit, is one of the niyamas, one of these ethical principles that is meant to help us relate to our internal world. And here's what the sutras have to say about contentment. Sutra 232 outlines the 5 niyamas. There are 5 niyamas. Niyamas comprise of cleanliness, contentment, or the ability to be comfortable with what we have and what we do not have, discipline, study, and reverence to a higher intelligence. 242 goes on to outline contentment a little more, and it says, the result of practicing contentment is total happiness. So, contentment. Allowing ourselves to be content with what we have, and not necessarily feeling like we need something that we don't have so that we can be content. What this concept of contentment does is it allows us to really sit with whatever is in the present moment and recognize that we are exactly where we need to be. Contentment keeps us in the present moment, whereas happiness, when we think about happiness and everything that is talked about in our culture, it always seems like happiness is something out there in the future, that we always need to be doing something so that we can be happy. Whereas contentment is, we don't need to be doing anything other than what we are doing, but maybe we can change our perspective and be content with whatever it is we're already doing. So contentment is very much about practicing in the present, whereas happiness, it can be in the present moment, but it always seems to be something that we're chasing. And it always seems to be like we have to do something to be happy. Whereas contentment, we're doing what we're doing and we're content while we're doing it. And this is so important because it takes that race out of the whole equation. We don't have to add in extra things. We don't have to wait to be content. We just change our mind. Now, that's really challenging. To change our perspective about something, to completely change our mind and how we think, super challenging. So I'm not trying to say that this is an easy fix by any means. Nothing in yoga is easy if you haven't learned that yet. But it's really important that we really work on this shift in our life. And one of the best ways that we can work to find more contentment in our life is by practicing gratitude. When we practice gratitude, we're able to be grateful for what we already have, grateful for the simple, mundane things. And that's really important, that we are grateful for those simple and mundane things. And the last thing I want to say about contentment is that I think that it can really empower us. Sometimes people think that contentment is boring or dull, and that it means that we can't be high achievers or we can't be motivated to go out in the world and do bigger and better things, because we shouldn't be looking out into the future, looking for bigger and better things. We should just be content with what we have as it is. And yes, that's one interpretation of contentment. But the way that I like to look at it is an interpretation that really empowers us to use all of the tools that we have, our resourcefulness, our creativity that's innate within each and every one of us, to make lemonade out of the lemons that we're given, to use a cliche, to use what we have within us to get the things that we want, rather than waiting for years because we think we need X, Y, and Z before we can get A. And we see this in education a lot. We think that we need a master's degree, a PhD, a different degree. We think that we need all this extra training to get to X point. And sometimes, yes, that's true and it's helpful, but we might be overlooking the strengths and the resources that we already have. probably because it's harder to use them, that it makes us more vulnerable and somehow is culturally unacceptable. And we totally pass over what we already have within us. And sometimes that's our greatest resource. That's what makes us unique and different. And that's what will help us succeed the most. And so we go out into the world and we get all these degrees and we get all this learning, and it's helpful too. But then we realize at the end of all of it, we've had all along what we needed to succeed. We just weren't able to find it. So in a way, practicing contentment, you can kind of think as a little bit of a hack towards happiness. Instead of going out into the world and getting all of these external things to bring us happiness, we go inside. And we find that contentment, and that contentment brings us happiness. So work with the practices today, work on integrating gratitude into your life as much as you possibly can, and start shifting your perspective slowly. Remember, gradual is a key word here in all of our yoga practices and in all of the sutras. We gradually start to shift our perspective, and over time, hopefully that will shift our mindset and it will totally transform and change our life. Enjoy the practices today, and I'll see you again tomorrow where we'll talk more about success. Namaste.